All righty. We're going to go over Wild Wonder is over. Now what? Right now, I'm going to share some of my ideas and some practical things you can apply. Here are all my notes from this year's conference. Let me switch over to my other camera here real quick to say hi. Hello, everybody. Right now, we're going to go over some common things that come up for people after the Wild Wonder Conference is over, some ideas and some practical things that you can do. So, I also want to just start off saying that one of the classes that I really enjoyed this year was the class by Vitor Velez. And I just took that one yesterday. That was one of the only ones that I missed the live version of. Here are my notes from his class. And this is the first time I actually did a video class. But what I want to say right now is this was one of my favorite classes. And what I appreciate about it is that Vitor Velez put a lot of thought into the concepts of it. And there was, if you mind this class, like you could watch this class multiple times and each time learn something very, very powerful and also something that you won't be able to find in very many places. So for tonight, the show that I'm going to do tonight, talking about now that the conference is over, what to do, is going to be similar to his. I'm going to try to cram a lot of ideas into here that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I'm not going to worry so much about like making it all exciting and fun. There's just going to be a lot of knowledge and powerful concepts packed into this class. That is my goal. I also want to say that if you weren't able to attend the Wild Wonder Conference this year and are considering the video pass, I will talk about that as well. So even if you didn't go to the conference, this could be a valuable video for you, but I'm not going to try to make it flashy. There's going to be a lot of thoughts and ideas, so process that how you will. Hi, Jean. Hi, Cindy. Um, yes, and while I'm there, I will try to sort of review some of the classes. Let me switch to my other camera here so you can see my sketchbook, which really contains a lot of my thinking from the conference and sort of my process from the conference. I will talk about some of these classes, but I don't think I will be able to go through all of them in this video. That would be way too much. I might try in the future, or I might create like a version of this scanned in that you can review. And here you can see the beginning of my brainstorms post conference. As you can see, I use this brainstorming to sort of process how I felt post conference. That's me post conference. And then I ended up having to add some extra pages into the back of the sketchbook to do Vitor's class, and I thought too much about like where should I put that class in because everything else is in chronological order. I have here a that's weird that my internet is unstable because I'm in a co-working space. It's supposed to have really good internet. Anyways, here you can see this brainstorming exercise. I'm going to explain that you can replicate to sort of help. It's like a mind mapping exercise that you can use after the conference to kind of get your ideas straight and also make the most of the conference. Or you might from that part decide whether you want to buy the video pass or not. And then I have a whole list of specific techniques. I see that Cindy also took Vitor's class. Yes, it's one of the ones that I would recommend rewatching. Let me switch to my other camera here. Or actually, no, I'll just go to his page. I would recommend rewatching this class. I would recommend, I don't know if you can access them, but ones from the past. So Vitor Velez is the type of artist that normally doesn't talk about what he does. He just blows everyone away with his art, right? But several years ago, I interviewed him on the Nature Journal show actually several years ago before he taught at any of the conferences, and then they reached out to me to ask to put them in touch with him to teach at a conference. And I was not sure how he was going to do at teaching, because teaching is a different skill set from creating virtuosic art. And I consider his art virtuoso level. Sometimes those people don't share about his process. And you might have noticed that his handle on Instagram is the Headless Sketcher. He never would even post photos of his own face on his Instagram. So the fact that he came to Wild Wonder to teach a class is kind of a big deal, in my opinion. And I was blown away the first time by the way he structured the class and explained his process, because he proved himself as a good teacher. Not all experts on a topic are actually good at teaching that topic. Oftentimes, the people that are best at a certain thing, like math or certain types of art, are not the best people to teach that topic. He proved that he was able to do that. However, one thing is he does have a shy personality. He doesn't create like a lot of fireworks during his presentation, like some of our other very charismatic teachers do. Some teachers do that. He doesn't do that part. And he has an accent that might be challenging for some people who aren't used to hearing different Englishes. His English is perfect and precise and high vocabulary. However, he does have certain accent. He speaks, I believe, Polish is his native tongue, and Portuguese. He's from Portugal, but lives in Poland. So he probably speaks more languages than the majority of us here. And his English is perfect, but it does have some accents. And I find that certain English native speakers have a very low tolerance for understanding different accents. So that's one of the things about the video pass, is you can always pause and go back to try to understand what he said. And just remember, there's a pattern to it. So like the way he pronounces like aspirated A's at the beginning of words that start with A versus words that start with H might confuse you at first, but there's a pattern to it. And he also doesn't put like a ton of fireworks, like I said, into the class. So the thoughts and the concepts are very well organized, and you're learning stuff that he has spent tens of thousands of hours. He has spent tens of thousands of hours developing these practices and these concepts. And in his class, you have a chance to basically peep behind the scenes, which I think is amazing. So I will be, I'm still reacting to Cindy's comment here. I will be sort of processing some of the concepts from that class for a long time to come. And I do think his past classes, like his class on composition, was an absolute master class as well. But I will talk about, it can be sort of overwhelming how many art classes and nature journaling classes there are at this conference, whether you marathoned it or you're watching the videos. And I will sort of talk about that and some strategies for dealing with that. Yes, absolutely. Cindy is absolutely correct. And I wrote that here in my notes, is that if you are a colored pencil artist, this class from Vitor is, if you had to put a number value on it, this class would be worth the cost of the video pass alone. I don't think he has an online teaching community or anything that he's charging for anywhere else besides Wild Wonder that you would be able to access. So I would say, just for the I don't do colored pencils, and I have a lot of biases against colored pencils, but still, it's like that class was amazing just for that. Okay, I'm going overboard on Vitor's class, but good question, Cindy. Let's see what Sandra just asked. Yes, Gene, we'll get to that. So hopefully this helps. If you haven't if you haven't bought the video pass yet, hopefully this will help right now a little bit on some for making that decision. What did Sandra say? Love to see the latest in the last class he did. I don't know if we can look up the ones from previous year. Yeah, his style, everybody is always blown away by his style. And collection of all the Wild Wonder classes to date. Wow, yeah, that would be amazing. One thing I'm actually thinking of doing is taking all of my notes from this year and scanning them and creating some type of document for people who want to look at someone else's, sketch notes from the conference. Like I have some of the funniest quotes that people said. I have sketches, obviously technical stuff as well, and a complete supply list. Okay, so let's dive into it a little bit here. Like I said, this video is going to be a little bit like Vitor's class. I'm going to try to pack a lot of important concepts and I think valuable thoughts into it. It might not be, super, there's not going to be a lot of fireworks today, but I'm going to hopefully give you some ideas that can help you. And let me get the camera a little bit closer to my sketchbook. I thought higher was better, but yes, there are definitely some great quotes this year. All right, I should have just kept it down low. Okay, so let's dive into some of these ideas that I have, specific techniques for dealing with sort of the post Wild Wonder conference and making the most out of it. So I think the first thing that I'm going to suggest is if you feel like a lot of thoughts and a lot of things that you're still processing after the workshop, what I recommend is doing some type of brainstorm. So right here, what I did is, and if you're a recovering perfectionist like me, you can overthink how to do a brainstorm and then you never brainstorm. One of the main things, and this was sort of a takeaway from the class this year, is that thinking about the things is not like thinking about nature journaling is not nature journaling. And thinking about brainstorming the best way is not brainstorming. You actually have to, or mind mapping, or whatever you want to call it. Some of these are like trademarked names, but basically you're making drawings and words on paper, trying to organize your thoughts. And after a conference that has a lot of classes, like where's the schedule? Here's the schedule right here. After all of these classes, you probably have a lot of thoughts. And if there's, these intense emotional things as well, for example, John Muir Law is talking about his children or talking about the last poem that his mentor read to him before he died, you probably have a lot of thoughts and you probably have a lot of emotions that you're processing after the conference. So it doesn't matter like what system you use, but through the process of mind mapping or sort of brainstorming on paper, you can start to kind of at least process those ideas in a visual way and on paper, which is one of the lessons from one of the keynote speakers about the notebook. And I'll talk about this more in a second. But the idea is that by putting stuff on paper, there's a lot of benefits, even if you don't have the perfect system. So don't let the perfect system get in your way. So basically what I did, this also ties into a mandala, which is a concept that came up in the book by the other keynote speakers. And so basically what I did is I drew myself here thinking. That's supposed to be me thinking. I've been working on this icon for many years, so it's part of my visual vocabulary. And the idea is this is to symbolize me thinking, right? This is me post Wild Wonder Conference. I have a title here, sometimes even just going over the wording. It gives you some of those benefits of art on your brain, like some of the keynote speakers talked about, but it also has some of the benefits of notebooking that the other keynote speaker talked about. And I have these ideas in a physical place and I can interact with them in this way that makes them more meaningful. And that's just one of the ways to process. So what I would recommend after the conference is to create a sort of drawing mandala brainstorm thing like this, and start putting down some of the different sort of categories from the conference. Yours could be totally different from mine, but I'll just go over a few of mine, right? So what's all the stuff that's in my brain after the conference? So that's me. I have a lot of thoughts and ideas, right? So after the conference, I have thoughts and ideas. I put that here. Similar to that, I put learnings. What are some of the things that I learned, like specific things that I learned? And then here I have projects. Do you have unfinished projects after the conference? Oops, those are chocolate covered almonds, not those. I'll talk about those in a minute. Do you have like pages where you started something and then didn't finish it from the conference? Probably a lot of people do. And so it's like, that's something like, what should we do with that? What about notes? Do you have a bunch of notes from the conference, or are they all in a bunch of different places? How can we deal with that? What about your nature relationship? Have you been thinking about your nature relationship? How much time you do or do not spend outside after the conference? That might be something that you're thinking about. Materials. Did you buy a bunch of stuff? Or are there things that you wish you got after the conference? Are there things that you used during the conference that ended up being very useful? I'm going to talk about one technique called, I call it MVPs and LVPs, most valuable players and least valuable players. That's a very useful technique to use to deal with the materials after the conference. Another one would be to come up with ways to give them away. Like this, I am giving away this fountain pen. I got it after the conference last year, and one of the classes last year inspired me to buy this fountain pen. It's really cool. You can put, it has the cartridge, the adapter to put waterproof ink in it, but I don't really use it. So that for me is a least valuable player, or at least a least used player. And so what's a way to, you know, sort of recycle these through the community so that other people don't have to just go buy a new one of these? So I'm going to be thinking about stuff like that. I know Sandra has worked with me a little bit on in the past on some ideas about mailing stuff out. But anyways, moving onwards, materials, techniques. Are there certain techniques that you learned at the conference or practiced or were exposed to at the conference? Are there ones that you know, were really interested in that want to follow up on? Then I have another category here, mentors and teachers. Who were people that you resonated with their teaching style? You know, do you want to, were you inspired now to learn more from Rosalie Hazlett? Or maybe there's a professional connection that you can make with one of the instructors, or maybe there's something that you could offer them, right? So the mentors and the teachers, also a lot of them, including myself, have for pay or free online learning communities or classes or books. So these are all things around mentors and teachers, right? Books or products. And then there's relationships. So this is related to mentors and teachers, but maybe there were people that you met or community that you formed during some of the you know, like Pencil Miles and Chill. Maybe there's people you want to follow up with, or maybe you want to create a club. And then down here, I have feelings. I personally did feel some sadness and depression, especially the first day after the conference. Maybe you felt joy, fear, overwhelm. I'll put overwhelm. There's also energy. So here I have energy, which I think is sort of like a feeling. Maybe after the conference, you have a lot of energy. And this is something that's always really important after a class, or maybe it's after hanging out with a certain person, or maybe after doing a certain activity. You notice you always have energy. That's a good thing to notice and think about, how can you channel that? That brings me to the next thing here soon. So now we're back to thoughts and ideas. Do you have like goals or plans or to-dos? A lot of times you go to the conference and you end up with, you know, do you have a list of things to do? Like, you know, Jack recommended, like, you know, being very intentional about how we cultivate our attention, or how we cultivate our community or relationships. Maybe you came away with the thought that, oh, I need to spend more time gardening, because that lady at the beginning, was it Jennifer Jewell or Jessica Jewell, talked about all the benefits of gardening. So maybe you have to-do lists, right? So all of those things came out when I did this like 20-minute brainstorm. And so what I suggest is that this is one of the specific techniques that I'm going to mention tonight, is that you take a empty sheet of paper. It could be a big one. Sometimes big is good. You draw yourself in the middle, and you start making these sort of things radiating off, and some of the stuff that you have in your mind. And so right now, after the conference, this is related to the conference, but you could apply this to other things, right? And just starting to get it on paper and related in space, this is what Roland Allen, one of the things Roland Allen was talking about, and we know as nature journalers, is that when you can get your thinking on paper, you can sometimes manipulate it in space or move it around or understand it in space. And the human brain understands things better when they're in space. So, I know my brain is really good at thinking about how these things are arranged on this page. It's very different from when it's all in some digital dream world in the cloud that you have no idea where those are geographically. So we've got our ideas out here on space, and the next thing I would recommend for this technique is to now make sticky notes, small sticky notes with some verbs on them. So these are all like mostly concepts that came out of my mind, and this is an arbitrary structure. It may or may not work for you, but it's worth a try. These are all these sort of concepts or like nouns from the conference, and now these are all verbs. So for example, I have one that says connect on it. So I can think about, which mentors or teachers or which things do I want to connect to? Maybe I want to connect with these clubs that I heard about or this online class program that one of the teachers offers. So I could go around and I could put one of these sticky notes on that area. Then I have another one that is follow up. So follow up is a verb that's sort of like, I need to do more on this. So maybe one of my projects here, I want to follow up, or maybe I had a conversation with someone in Pencil Miles and Chill that I want to follow up on. Here's one for channel. So maybe like this energy that I have post conference, I want to direct it into something. And then maybe I want to, and I think this is a really important one, is synthesize or rehash. And I'll go into this more in depth. So maybe there was a specific technique. So like, I'll put colored pencil inside of this technique. Oh, this should actually go kind of here between materials and techniques. Colored pencil. And next to it, I'll put synthesize rehash. And that's something that I need to rethink about and sort of process more. All right, for people who might be just joining in, I want to say that my goal with this live tonight is to really go over a lot of concepts. It might not be a very flashy video, and I might not be like super high energy and super pumped up all the time, those are all supposedly things that get people to watch videos longer online, and then it makes those videos more successful in terms of how many people see them than others. But I just want to let you know that I'm not trying to do that tonight. I'm trying to give you useful information and really develop some concepts that I think can help people deal with the post conference or make decisions about whether or not they want to take the video pass. Okay, so that is one possibility. Another thing is I highly recommend reading some of the books or listening to the audiobooks of some of the people that either spoke or taught. And right now I'll put up my supply list. It does have all the books of all the authors that were at the event. If you go to marleypifer.com/uncategorized/wild-wonder. So hopefully you can, if you just go to marleypifer.com, you should be able to find it. But I have a complete supply list on there. I'll put it in the comments because sometimes you can copy and paste from the comments better. But I have the list of all of the books as well. And what else? I recommend reading them if you were interested in what that person had to say. Sometimes it can be over much. Like I think I did too much homework. I read most of this book, and I listened to the entire Your Brain on Art book, and it was unfortunate because the sometimes authors, after they write a book, they go around doing keynotes, and they basically just say an outline version of their book. So if you just read their book and then you go see them speak and you're all excited about diving deeper and learning more, you realize that they just give you a very boring Reader's Digest version of the book that you literally just read. And so that can be a problem sometimes, but that might just be something that I've had experiences with. But anyways, what I'm doing with this book, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm listening to the audio, and I did buy. So this is sort of wasteful in terms of money, but I bought the print version because this one has a lot of images in it. The Your Brain on Art doesn't have as many images in it. I wanted to see these notebooks, so what I do is I listen to part of it, and then I read part of it, and I sort of skim it, and I put sticky notes in. So sticky notes are really helpful for um, any type of study. You can go back over your journal from the conference and put sticky notes in on pages that you need to do more work on, or you can use sticky notes in sort of a brainstorming way like this. Okay, then the other thing, that's reading books and listening. I'm going to cross these out as I go. So reading books and listening, and like I said, there's a lot of books this year. Oh, I never posted into the chat. There's a lot of books. A lot of people at the conference have books this year. And so reading them is one way to sort of follow up. Also, one of the keynote speakers has like a podcast about gardening. That was Jessica or Jennifer Jewell. I'm blanking on her name. The first day, Jennifer Jewell. So you could watch a podcast. The other thing is watching the video passes. So I'll talk a little bit now about video passes for people like Gene or others who didn't attend the conference. There is a video pass option. And the first time, and I've been going to every single occurrence of this conference, and the first time that I did a video pass was yesterday. I usually am more motivated by classes, like even if it's online, if it's live, I'm more motivated because I feel like I'm actually there with the instructor. And video classes are challenging for me to maintain attention. But Vitor Velez was the first time I did it because I had to work on the day of his class and I missed his class. So I went back and did the video pass. And a couple things I want to point out is there is a big difference between doing it live versus doing video. If you can, maybe I'm just old school. I would recommend doing it live whenever possible. I think that there's more of a disconnect already. The fact that he's in Europe and you're wherever you are, you're thousands of miles away from this person who's teaching. But if you're at least together in time, that I feel like makes a difference for the human brain for learning. But if you have to do video pass, it's still possible. You're just going to have to work on your sort of study habits and energy level and intention in a way to make it work, in my opinion. So I had to do it as soon after the class as possible. That made a difference for me. Other thing I noticed is that I kept wanting to hit the pause button. And so when you're taking a class, like if you're sketchnoting like this, for example, during a class, and you can see that I do this during the live classes as well. This was all done during the live class. This is all done during the live class. I have to like hurry, right? They're not going to pause. Like the teacher, you can't hit the pause button on a normal in life teacher, but you can when it's the video pass. And I found that that was tempting and dangerous because I would pause and then I'd be like, oh, let me like draw his face better, or let me like do this more in a more complicated way. And I think it could lead to procrastination and not finishing the class at all. Also, you take away that feeling of sort of like rushedness. And I think sometimes feeling rushed actually can help your learning and your motivation. The other thing is the video froze for me a couple times, and I had issues sort of like fitting it on my screen so it would be big. And I think every single one of those little digital obstacles is going to make it, at least for people like me who get sort of frustrated or distracted, that kind of thing is going to take away from your ability. Like, I don't think I would not be able to do all of these classes as a video pass. I just wouldn't. I would get bored or I would get distracted or something. This is a really good tip that I didn't have in my notes, but great tip from Sandra. Thanks for pointing that out. And I think that might really help with the motivation part. Still, if anyone is able to do all of the classes in a video pass, please tell me, and I will bow down in wonder and amazement at your discipline to be able to do all of these as video. So be realistic with yourself and have some self-awareness, but also don't limit yourself. If like you have a story that, oh, you always do it live, or oh, you only do it as video, maybe you can grow outside of that. And this year, for the first time, I did one as a video pass, so that's good. Okay, moving on. Let's see if people on Instagram have any questions. I missed the book title. So the book title, there are 2 books. Well, they're all on my supply list, so I'll put that here. I don't think you can click on it as a link. But I have a list with all the supplies from the conference and all of the books written by the authors. So one of the ones that I enjoyed the most and had not read, because I had read several of the speakers' books already, is this one called The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen. If you are interested in notebooks, sketchbooks, and want to know more about the history, it is admittedly a Eurocentric perspective, but it's an enjoyable read. I think it's very interesting and thoughtful. I kind of like British authors, and so maybe that was just part me. I've been listening to the audio and doing the physical one sort of in tandem. The other main book that was by one of the keynote speakers was Your Brain on Art. So that was a question from Instagram from G Hatcher. Good question. Okay, so next technique. This is my list of practical techniques of things you can do to try to integrate, incorporate, process, stay sane after the conference. Is habit training. And so lots of times at a conference like this, it has a lot of elements of like, oh, like I should do that, or oh, I should do that, or oh. And sometimes that can actually be the addictive part of that kind of thinking. Or like, for example, they say that's, why people get addicted to self-help books is like each time you read a new self-help book, the new self-help book is like, look, art and Your Brain on Art is kind of like this. So loved the book, and the authors seem like really amazing and everything, but I'm just gonna say a couple critical things, so don't take this the wrong direction. But Your Brain on Art, it's New York Times best selling and a bunch of stuff like that, and it has a bunch of like really important concepts in it, but it to me sort of feels like a self-help book. And when you read it, or you go to a conference like the one we just went to, or you hear these people give their keynote, one of the things that can happen, and this is something that I've done a lot, so that's why I'm going to speak to it, is you hear this keynote and you're like, wow, like, doing art is going to extend my lifespan. So basically, doing art, or like exposing yourself to art, or listening to music, or they even like bring in like virtual reality, basically doing anything like within the very broad definition of art can increase your lifespan, lower your cholesterol, lower your stress chemicals like cortisol, improve your your memory, fight Alzheimer's. So basically, like every single thing, they didn't specifically say improve your sex life, but basically every single thing that like humans think about as wanting in terms of health, doing art or listening to music, or in this very broad definition, can help. So what can happen is you listen to something like that, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to start making habits around this, or I'm going to start doing this. It's a very seductive concept, and it offers you so much, right? Also, the one on gardening, um, Jessica Jewell. I'm blanking on her name again. Um, she talked about, all of the benefits of gardening, and like gardening is amazing. And so you're gonna listen to her talk. I can't find it right now. It should be here on day one. You're gonna listen to her talk, and then you're gonna be like, I'm gonna start a garden. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. Here she is, Jennifer Jewell. You know, it's more than a cute hobby, and you know, gardeners are powerful agents for the positive. Everything she said was like a quote, um, and it makes you want to garden more. So, one of the things that I think after the conference to sort of process and be sort of realistic and self aware about is, are you really going to do all of these things after the conference? And if it comes to like habits, like, Jack said, like your attention is, they're trying to turn your attention into a commodity, right? And where you put your attention is so important. He talked about that multiple times during this conference. So maybe you're like coming up with a habit like, I'm not going to look at my phone. Anyways, what I want to say is that um, there is a lot of times after a conference like this, or after reading a book or taking a class, where you tell yourself that you're going to create a certain habit. And this goes back to the thoughts, ideas, goals, and plans. So, goals, let's say goals. We've created goals for ourselves, and maybe we've created to-do lists after the conference. And those are tricky areas, because sometimes we just make lots of to-dos and make lots of goals and don't actually do them. So I have a whole video about this, because this ties into mindset. And a lot of times the classes don't talk about mindset. A lot of times the classes talk about specific techniques. Several years ago, I did do a class at Wild Wonder about mindset, and I think that this is the most important part. It doesn't matter how good you are at watercolor. If you have procrastination or perfectionism issues, that's all that matters. And so I'm going to share that because I made it free online now, and I think it is, let me see if I can post the link for it. It has a weird name, but it's free and available on YouTube. Here we go. And I'll mention a couple things from that class. Specifically, I'll post it here in Instagram too. I know these links are ungainly and might not even be useful at all, but for the hardcore people, you can find it. But one of the things I'm going to talk about is there's a couple ways to sort of make habit formation easier. And the main one I'm going to mention right now is, I call it buddy up. Um, if you find a club, if you find one friend, it could be an online club, you're way more likely to be able to create a habit. So, like, for example, if you come out of this conference thinking, I'm going to start gardening like once a week because Jennifer Jewell talked about all of the benefits. If you start going to a community garden, and like volunteering there, or collaborating with other people there, you're way more likely to keep up that habit than if you just try to create a habit like in your own backyard, where you have no accountability with other people. We're social beings. So if you want to create a nature journaling habit, or you want to create a gardening habit, or you want to do something from your brain on art book, and create a habit around that, buddying up by finding a club or another person to do it with is probably the best hack that I know of, and is the one that's most likely to help you actually create and maintain a habit. So that would be my recommendation. And that link I posted is a whole class on mindset and how that can influence your nature journaling. It really comes into play when we have habits like this that we want to develop. Or, maybe you want to develop a notebooking habit. It's the same thing. If you can find a community or another person that creates sort of like a club or a system of accountability, that could work really well. And this ties into one of the concepts over here, which is the fact that a lot of the mentors and teachers from the conference have like online schools, or they have like virtual lessons or virtual study sessions. That's something that I do, for example, on my Patreon. But a lot of the people at the conference mention that. And if you really want to, here's where a brainstorm comes in handy. If you really want to connect with like a certain instructor from the conference, here's my sticky note. Look, I could take this and then now I could put it on one of these instructors, or I could go to my table of contents where I have all the classes. Like, say, I really want to learn more from Roseanne Hanson about book arts, and I could put this sticky note to connect with her. Because one of the things that you can do post conference to help with your habits is sign up for a class. Sometimes when you pay for something, it also makes you more likely to do it. So that's enough on that one. I think we covered that one and mindset pretty well. We talked about brainstorming, mental map. If you're just showing up now, you might not have been here for that part, but creating a brainstorm with you in the middle, and then just if you have a lot of ideas and thoughts and feelings from the conference, just start writing them down and placing them sort of geographically on the page in relationship to yourself. And just getting those ideas out here on paper is really a helpful specific technique that can even be fun, can be done maybe in 20 minutes, and can really help you process the conference after Wild Wonder is over. Or you could apply it to other aspects of your life. So cross that one out. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about supplies. So you can see here that my pen is running onto there, but you can see here I have a whole section on materials. So after the conference, you might have a ton of materials that you want to buy or have bought already. And so that's something that I think one useful thing to do is to this is a tricky one. Going out there and buying a lot of stuff after the conference is definitely possible. One thing I recommend doing is this thing I call MVPs and LVPs, most valuable players and least valuable players. So what I do is after the conference, or this could be after a field trip or after a year, I make a list of what were the most valuable players. So like, for example, for whatever reason, I ended up using this colored pencil a lot for my note taking. Not on that page or that page, but maybe it came in later. Here you can see it here on this page. And so that actually was something that I really ended up using a lot. So you basically just keep a list of what were the supplies that were the most valuable players, or like most used. Colored pencil, pink colored pencil. And then you also keep a list of the ones that you didn't use at all. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be I used this fountain pen once during the entire conference, and I'm going to be getting rid of it and giving it away to one of my followers online. I haven't figured out logistically the best system for this type of thing, but I think creating a system where we can either donate, you might not be able to read my notes here, I'm sorry, donate, purge, or have some type of like art supplies library, so that we don't all have to buy that one thing that someone mentioned in a class and then only use it one time. And then have it sitting in our closet. And I know some people are like, oh, I don't get rid of anything, I save everything. And that can be fine for a rainy day, but honestly, we don't live in a rainy day yet. And sometimes all of those supplies sitting in your house can have like a negative energetic effect on your art, in my opinion. So what if there was a way we could donate or purge those items or share them or have some type of library or donate? Anyways, just putting it out there. There might be other people who would use that supply that's sitting on your shelf. Seriously, we've got art supplies sitting on our shelves that there might be someone out there who could really use that, and you have it sitting there for 5 years, 10 years, maybe unused. That is a little bit untenable, in my opinion, so let's think about that a little bit after the conference. Also, like maybe there's things that a certain person use that you really, really want to get. There's nothing wrong with that. So like, for example, here are my notes um, from Kate's class, Kate Rudder's class, and she talked about crisp, delicate, juicy, and spicy styles. Maybe one of these really called to you after her class, after she showed examples of these, and you're like, hey, I really want some more supplies because I want to try to do juicy. Or maybe you watched Alex Boone's class or Vitor Velas's class, and even though you've been a watercolor person, you want to try colored pencils. There's nothing wrong with getting those. And sometimes the techniques are very supply specific. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's why it's on, materials is on the list. I created that list for you that describes all of the supplies mentioned at the conference, I believe, are on that list. So you can check it out. And yeah, I think supplies are important, but having them sitting on your shelf for 5 years is probably not the best. Okay, continuing on, notebooking, sketch noting, and basically like note taking from the conference. So obviously, if you did them live or if you're watching the video pass, I highly recommend basically sketch noting. You can draw some of these classes. So like Vitor's, for example, it was not meant to be a hands-on class. This class, it was like a lecture. And there were several other teachers that also did lectures. And like, for example, Michael Boardman's had a couple parts designed for sketching, but a lot of the classes are lectures. That doesn't mean you can't draw and sketch note during the video if you're watching them as a video. So sketch noting. Also, the fact that I think this book brings a lot of interesting thoughts into the mix-up, and Roland Allen did have a conversation with Jack where they talked about, like what are the benefits of using notebooks or nature journals to sort of understand to organize your thinking and come up with new ideas. And that was a very rich conversation. So there was a lot that you could get out of that. And one of the things that Roland Allen has been investigating and researching people for years on their sketchbooking or notebooking practice and how that emphasized their thinking. So he has some thoughts to share about this. And if you're like me and you have lots of notebooks and sketchbooks, this is an opportunity to learn from someone who's been researching this quite a bit. And one of the things he said, he gave, Jack asked him, like, what are the top tips that people can apply that you've learned from this, right? And he said, one, catch related ideas on the same page. And then two, separate different elements of writing in different notebooks. So basically, both of those are saying the same thing. And if you're like me and have been keeping basically chronological nature journals that contain everything, like I made a video on one journal to rule them all. I think I made that video like 5 years ago saying keep everything in one journal. If that's been your thinking for a long time, and you've invested I have over 76 of these. I think I might be getting close to 80 of this size sketchbooks in the last 10 years, all organized chronologically. And this guy comes along, and both of his main tips, he has two main tips, and both of them basically boil down to put everything not by chronology, but by topic together. And so suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, do I need to start ripping pages out? And this is huge. And if you're a regular watcher of my content, then this is not a new concept to you, because it came up earlier this year in a video that I did, multiple videos that I did about recombinatorial nature journaling. And this came out, I mentioned it in my top 5 nature journaling techniques for 2025 video that I'll post a link to that in my comments here. And I'll try to post on Instagram as well. But basically, I try to summarize or share 5 techniques for 2025. And one of them is recombinatorial nature journaling. And it's kind of a pain in the butt, and it's kind of crazy once you start doing it. But I think it has huge potential. And some people are already do this. But I think for the most part in nature journaling, we don't. So here you can see something very scary to me, which is undoing the binding of a journal, starting to take pages out, and then reorganizing them into different journals. If you have spiral bound, it's one thing. If you don't have spiral bound, you can cut things out. And this is something that came up in that notebook book, is that, historically there have been certain notebooks that were called trash books, and those books were actually designed where at the end of the day you come back and you can rip pages of this out or cut them out and then put them into new or different organizations by topic, like when you get home, and you could glue or tape it or whatever. And this is something that as a nature journaler is kind of crazy, because we often work chronologically. I think lots of sketchbookers just work chronologically, partly because it just is automatic, like a diary. But this whole concept of recombinatorial, I think, has so much untapped potential. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I did use it in this book so that all of my Wild Wonder conference notes are all in the same book, because I filled up a book partway through Wild Wonder, and I started keeping notes in a new book. And I decided, after really struggling with it, that if this guy who's been studying notebooks and how notebooks influence thinking, he's been studying that for a really long time. If both of his tips are catch related ideas on the same page and separate different elements into different books, both of those boil down to organize ideas by topic. And so imagine if you went back through all of your nature journals from 10 years, took all the pages that had to do with birds and put all of those into one notebook. What would that look like, and how would that influence your thinking and learning around birds and nature journaling? It's kind of crazy, and it's kind of sacrilege, and I'm going to make a video about it because it's possible that I've been journaling wrong for my whole life. That might be the topic for an upcoming video. So anyways, that one I'm obviously passionate about and think is very important. Another technique you can do post-conference is journal your emotions. And this is a topic that comes up in this book. So why not apply it to the post-conference? I'm not going to talk about specific techniques for journaling your emotions. Another one is rehashing the page or rehashing pages. So this would look like going back over your notes, from classes, and maybe adding stuff or adding color. Like maybe there's something in here I want to highlight, or something I want to put a star next to, or something I want to come back to. That would be rehashing your pages. Another thing, you could get really crazy and scrapbooky with it. You could cut things out. There's a lot you could do. But rehashing your pages is one way to improve memory. Every time you process something, it helps with memory and retention. It also could help you with this next one. I'm going to jump down here to this one, which is random hybrids and synthesis. or syntheses. So I think a really powerful thing, and this one is only for the hardcore people who are still watching and haven't given up on this video yet, because this is sort of a personal trick that I use and I don't always publicize, is that sometimes there's this concept in agriculture that sometimes can relate to other fields, but it's not just agriculture, but it was discovered through agriculture, is hybrid vigor. If you have different heirloom varieties of corn that have, these are varieties of corn that are not GMO. There's no GMO involved in this. These are varieties that are very different genetically. This can happen with animals too. But they're the same species. They've been isolated genetically for a while, so they have very different genetic makeups, and you cross those. For whatever reason, a lot of times that first generation, that F1 generation, just has lots of vigor, and it won't last. The next generation will be totally different, but a lot of times that first combination of those two very different things produces what's called hybrid vigor. And so sometimes if you take two very disparate things, like maybe you take what if you take something from Verena Hillgartner's class, like for example how to make these really cool Turkish folds. If you took that class and then you take the was it like another class with Rosalie Hazlett about illustrated essay, and then you make an illustrated essay on a Turkish fold. Sometimes, or you combine something from, let's say, Beth Ann's class about gardening, and you combine it with, how about Alex Boone's class about rivers, nature journaling rivers. Maybe you go through an entire watershed and nature journal people's gardens in that entire watershed of a similar river and then map them. So one thing is you can also do this with techniques. So like you could hybridize, say, Roseanne Hanson's book arts techniques, like this. See this like fold out thing she taught us about? You could hybridize that with Vitor Velez's sort of colored pencil techniques. And what would that hybrid be? Synthesis is the same. So it's like maybe there's two ideas that almost seem in conflict from different teachers. You can synthesize those. And this is a really powerful place for learning and for art. A lot of times, hybridizing two very different things creates something very rich and vigorous. I already talked about mindset. Play, I think, is something that came up a lot during the conference. So thinking about this applies to mindset is how can you be playful in your practice and carry that forward. Some of the other things that came up is like gardening, and people are like, oh, I'm gonna garden so much after this conference. And that is something that is a specific technique. You can actually go out there and garden. And maybe it's tied in with habits, like maybe you need to do it multiple times. Maybe it's tied in with play. Maybe it's tied in, like I mentioned it before, with community. Like if you find a community, you could be more likely to keep up that specific technique. Gardening is a technique. That's what we're talking about, is specific things you can do after the conference sort of process. Just spending time in nature is a huge one. Birding came up. Birding and gardening were sort of two big themes, I think, this year, the two biggest ones. This ties into buddying up or finding another group. A lot of times there's already groups that are birding, and you could just go along and nature journal with them. Maybe that would help you with your habits. It's definitely possible to nature journal with birders, even if none of them are nature journaling themselves. Following up with a teacher is another specific habit. So you could go through all of the classes after you take them, or maybe after just one, you realize, wow, I really want to learn more from Linda Feltner. And you can respectfully reach out to these people or follow them online or find some of their online classes. Maybe they have in-person classes. Highly recommend that. You can also form a group of your own. This is something I did early in my nature journaling career. I started leading or organizing a club in Northern California where I was living. It's a great way to keep up a nature journaling habit and, process and use your energy after the event. So remember, sometimes these classes can give you energy, and figuring out ways to channel that into some of the things you want to do can be really awesome. And then I think the last one I'm going to mention here in terms of specific techniques is this values versus time spent. It's a Venn diagram, and it came up in, I think, a backstage pass conversation. Here you can see it. This is a diagram where you either put, I heard it explained two different ways, but it can either be what brings you joy and where I'm spending my time, or it can be my values and where I'm spending my time. So you make a circle for each one of those where I spend time, and you can do this to be honest. You can use some type of time tracker, or at least some type of journaling to kind of get it more or less. And then the other one is joy or what you value. So you might write down, like, what are things that I value? And one might be community, or giving back, or creativity. Some of my values, for example, are like learning, people. That's kind of a big one, but ethics, learning, people, ethics, awareness. These could be anything, or they could be specific things that bring you joy, like, for example, birding, time in nature, gardening, time with family. All those kinds of things could go in this circle, right? And then you do your time tracker, and you see, like, you measure. Ideally, you do a time tracker, right? Because this is one of those. Oops, I should have made those dotted lines. This is one of those things where we can lie to ourselves. Like, our brain is really good at lying to itself or making up stories. But that's why a time tracker can be useful. Like, how many hours do you spend on Instagram? Let's just use this as an example. Some of us are on Instagram right now. So is Instagram one of the things that you spend, or what about driving? If you live in the US, a lot of people spend a lot of time driving. Do you spend 1 hour driving a day? Or, what about, and then, yeah, put in the good ones too. So you put in, like time with family, or gardening could be, maybe gardening. And if they're ones that are shared, yeah, you would put them in here. So gardening, and then you could put like the number of hours. I haven't actually done this before, this exact one, but it was mentioned several times during the conference. So I just wanted to share that with you. That came up in a really interesting conversation that talked about women being made to feel guilty because they were dedicating time to nature journaling, and their spouse wanted them to clean the garage, which was an interesting conversation. So that was mapping your values and joy and time spent. So you can see here that I kind of worked through this process with you tonight. I did a brainstorm with myself in the middle, and all of these different things that I had on my mind after the conference. So this is something that you can do, and I basically showed you how I did it. Then I used these sticky notes with different actions and placed those in different places if there was things I wanted to do. And then I went through a list of specific things that can help after the nature journaling conference is over. that can help you process and improve your memory and maybe follow up on some of the habits, because I think it's easy after a conference like this, like I said, to tell yourself, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and maybe you just create a massive to-do list for yourself. So let me see if there are any questions over here on Instagram. Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm going to end it at that. And just one last thing is, hopefully you enjoyed this content about the conference. I am going to be doing a few videos this week, maybe on my Instagram, about these prompts. I know I fell behind during the conference, but that always happens. And you can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and all of that for more, because there's going to be more coming. There's going to be some big transitions coming up in terms of what I'm talking about now that the conference is over. And starting off next Wednesday is going to be a video that came out early for my Patreon members. And I'll just post that there because it's one of the few ways that I actually make money doing this work to provide for myself and make ends meet. But this video came out early for Patreon members, and it's about nature journaling Amazonian fish in Manaus, and it's coming out next Wednesday. I have a couple other videos on the pipeline. Patreon members are going to see a lot of those videos first. I have a whole bunch of jaguar stuff coming up in October, so stay tuned. Conference is over, but lots of other nature journaling stuff coming up on my YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. All right, bye everybody. Bye.